Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm your host today. Hi, everybody. I'm Colin Campbell. I am the general manager at Sales Hacker. It's good to see all y'all. If you have been with us for a live webinar before, you know that we take it very, very seriously that you're giving us some of your time today. So we appreciate that. What we want to do is make that really valuable for you. So if you're joining right now, and I see a lot of you are, there's 30, 39, 41 people so far, you're coming in, get down in the chat right now, open it up, and then you see where that little blue bubble says panelists, make that say panelists and attendees. And this way, you can all talk to one another. You can talk to me and the panelists today. I'll help field your questions. We'll take questions throughout. You can connect with each other on LinkedIn. To start us off, please in the chat, introduce yourselves. We want to know your role. You can tell us your company or where you're at if you want. We always get friends from around the world. You can share what your favorite sandwich is. Today, mine changes, but today mine's a peanut butter and jelly, which crunchy peanut butter.
What kind of jelly?
You know what? I do something weird with the jelly. Apple jelly is, I think, underrated. It's delicious.
Underrated is a great word.
Colin, you're bougie, man. You got that apple jam, dude. That's you're bougie. You like that bougie PB&J.
I didn't know there was such a thing as bougie PB&J, but now I'm going to feel less ashamed of my 6-year-old taste in food, and I'll feel more confident that I'm doing the right thing by eating apple jelly. Let's see who's with us today. We got John Hill from Ideal Traits. He's a sales manager. Greetings from ATL, from Chris at CubeWise. Daryl is a sales manager. David's in Spain, building the SDR system sales machine from scratch. Welcome, David. That's a big project. Props. Jenna Morin is from Senbridge. She's an SDR. Hey, Jenna. Jennifer is a senior sales exec from QAD. This is a great group. Again, everybody, we really take it seriously that you're giving us your time and being here live. If you're watching the recording later, understand you might have been busy, but you should try to make it to a live one of these sometime. Great. If you're here live, we take it seriously, ask questions, talk to one another, use this time to engage your brain and learn with us because it's going to be exciting. Let's jump in. Today we're talking about how to maximize rep productivity without the burnout, because I think a lot of times what happens is we think we have to be super productive and we get really busy and we do lots of stuff and that leads to burnout, which, surprise, hurts productivity. And to help us have that conversation, I don't think we could have asked for a better panel on this. Really cool, different experiences in leadership. We have got Gianna Scorsoni. She's the GM, head of North America sales. Head of North America at AirCall. Gianna, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me that full title. Appreciate the change there.
Did I get it right?
Yeah, you did. You got it right. You got it right. Not just sales, but it's everything from demand gen all the way through customer success. So the whole customer journey.
All of it, which is so cool. Sam Nelson's here. Some of y'all might know Sam from his awesome work, just leading the charge on like really smart sales development best practices. He's an SDR leader at Outreach. Thanks for being here, Sam.
Great to be here.
We're pumped to have you, blue hair and all, as usual. And then a little different on the hair front, we've got Jason Bay. Jason is the Chief Prospecting Officer and just like a really knowledgeable, amazing sales genius, in my opinion, at Blissful Prospecting. Jason, thanks again, man, for being here. We appreciate it.
And I appreciate you pointing out the fact that I'm have no hair, which is the result of a receding hairline. My wife hates this hairdo, by the way. So
you're okay. Skin is in.
You have a very good shaped head, though.
Yeah,
thank you.
Like I wouldn't be able to pull it off with the shape. I'd pull up my hair.
All right. So just one more reminder, folks. Keep it lively in the chat. We want to see your questions. Feel free to connect with each other on LinkedIn. Do crazy stuff like that. Let's jump in. So, Gianna, we're talking about, I'm going to go to you first.
Sure.
We're talking about productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just set the stage a little bit. What does that actually mean? Like, how do you think about productivity and how do you measure it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think that's a thoughtful question. Productivity, in my opinion, I believe that it often gets misconstrued, right? People often think productivity, and that means how much can we squeeze out of every rep or how much activity can we drive? That's not productivity, because you can drive a plethora of, activity measures with, metrics heavily focused on activity. Not saying that's not important, but if the results aren't there, then that's not productivity, right? That's just wasting time. And so when I think about, what sales productivity really means, it means thoughtfulness, right? Paired with activity. It means effectiveness. So productivity equals success and engagement, not just activity.
Right on. Okay, so we're talking about, so we're not going to get into, I mean, maybe a little bit we can talk about like hacks later on or tips and tricks, but that's really not, in your opinion, it sounds like, not at the core of what makes a rep successful and productive in their role.
Absolutely. Look, I think that I believe in the saying, we need to work smart and hard. It's both, right? And so often, when you're only talking sales hacks, that's a shortcut. I grew up in the 80s, and there was a crazy board game I bought at a street fair one day that said, don't take shortcuts. And that was a lesson that I will always remember. It was a very strange board game that the police department, the NYPD, put out back in the 80s, but I think there's a message there, right? The message is that, shortcuts in life, if they're not smart and they're not calculated, and you're not really thinking about what the whole impact is, it can be quite dangerous. And so only focusing on how you can do more without the full picture can be quite dangerous to a business and to a team as well. Right? When we think about effectiveness, and we're really talking about burnout, how to prevent burnout here, if all we're doing is saying, okay, we're going to give you all of these hacks to drive more activity out of your reps, that takes a lot of the fun, a lot of the thought, and a lot of the intelligence out of the activity itself, the job itself, and then of course the impact. And Jason, I know that you had a lot of great thoughts around, really bringing personality and thought to the game as well.
Yeah, no, I love this. We had a really good conversation last time around this, so I'm excited to continue it. I think that this like purposeful, because I look through the lens of outbound, especially, and I think that one mode that people can get stuck in is, the sequence, and then executing the sequence, and then executing the task with no bigger picture around, like, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? And everyone here, your guys' companies, does just an awesome job of celebrating the customer and customer success. And I think that's the big thing to remind your reps of, is that, like, we're helping our customers here. Like, there's a bigger mission and purpose behind what we're doing. And one of the things that I highly recommend from a leadership standpoint is a lot of leaders share sales wins with their team. So-and-so just landed a big meeting. So-and-so just won a big deal, all this other stuff. And what they don't celebrate is customer wins. And it's so easy to do, with your customer success team, when you guys pump out a new case study, that should be dispersed across the entire sales team, not as a sales tool. You can use it for that, obviously, but it's like, hey, just remind everyone of like the good work that we're doing. So that's one really kind of practical thing that I think that you could do, is really remind people of, what are we doing here? What's the bigger purpose? How are we helping customers win? And that kind of drives the mindset when you're prospecting too. How can I find someone to help today? Versus how am I getting a meeting from someone? Those are two very sort of different ways to approach it. And I'm not saying that meetings are not important, that numbers are not important either, but that can be a really good way to motivate people.
I love that,
Sam.
Jason. That becomes, sorry to interrupt, that becomes more about problem solving, right? And being there for the customer, to be solution oriented. And you're allowing and empowering the rep to think critically, right? When they're on the phone, when they're, doing the outreach, it's how can I best help the customer? And in turn, the outcome is likely going to be a meeting, because they're employing active listening. They're really, actively engaged with finding the right solution, and if it even makes sense to drive that meeting. So in turn, yes, while we're saying, don't be so focused on activity, this is a way where, when you're really thinking about the end result that you're trying to get to, you're going to drive more impact and more results because of it.
One of the things, Jana, that I was thinking about since our last conversation was an actual metric for productivity. Do you have a metric for that at Aircall? Is it like revenue per rep or something else?
Yeah, I mean, we measure, of course, right? Like transparency and accountability is hugely important. So, it's great to say we want to empower and we want everyone to think critically and we want to be, solution oriented. It's really important for reps to also know where they are and what measurements is most likely, rule of thumb, going to help lead to success. And so it's really thinking about that entire funnel of conversion, right? How many dials or how many emails, how many active conversations. So yes, we provide transparency all the way down that funnel. Right. But it's thinking about how are you then going to communicate? It's not just a scoreboard, it's not just a leaderboard, but how can you use that as a coaching mechanism? Right. And so maybe that's a leadership hack, right? Of, okay, how are you going to look through, the funnel of conversion to, help reps understand where their like downfalls might be, where they may need to focus a little bit more based on individualized targets.
I love this. One metric that you can track that I don't see a lot of people tracking, I call it the reps load. So if you think of the load on their back to close a deal or to land a meeting, a good metric to know is how many activities does it take to create a meeting for them, right? And we don't really look at that as an individual metric. If you have someone that takes 50 activities to get a meeting versus someone that takes 10, think about the load that creates for the person that needs 50 activities. And it's not an exaggeration. I've seen that before, where it's
Wow.
they have to reach out, they have to, between email and phone, do 50 of those activities just to get a meeting. And that creates burnout right there. So that's another metric that you can look at as a leadership team too, is how much activity does it take to get the result?
That's interesting. Sam, what about at Outreach? When you think about productivity, are there metrics tied to it, or are you taking more like a holistic sort of motivation approach to it?
Okay, so I got a few thoughts on this. One of them is just like what causes burnout. A lot of it kind of comes from having to make a lot of decisions, and so just like having processes in place that requiring to make it so you don't need to make decisions that are inconsequential all of the time actually goes a really long way. The physical activity of doing SDR work is not really all that hard. It's like making tons of decisions all the time, and decision making is it's interesting. If you're trying to decide what you want to eat with somebody else for lunch, it can be a really hard, taxing decision, even though it's not that important of a thing. And so having processes and eliminating decisions where they don't make that big of a difference can do a lot in just helping avoid burnout.
Interesting.
That's one thing. The other thing is just being really clear about the goal for reps, at least from my perspective on the SDR team. It's very easy to know what your goal is. It's quota and what qualifies as quota. And you can measure everything by, does this get me closer or further away? One thing that causes reps to go crazy is they realize that there are a lot of good things to do that they can't possibly do. Right? And so you can start feeling guilty and unable to do everything that would be really good to do. And there's all these different ideas about things. It's very good to understand that there are a million good things to do that you can't do. What you need to focus on at every moment of the day is figuring out what that best thing is. And you figure out what that best thing is by figuring out what exactly your goal is. What thing is going to get you closest to that goal. So just kind of some thoughts on burnout and kind of how to look at it.
Interesting. So this is fascinating to me because so far we've just talked about how each of you view the topic. Sam, you're taking a very, to me, it's almost like a process, framework driven approach. Gianna, you're talking a lot about motivation, how leadership needs to model what a productive approach looks like. And Jason, you're maybe a mix of the two. You've talked about motivation and inspiration, inspiring people with customer stories, but also process. We got some great questions in the chat. If you don't mind, I want to jump into just a couple of them. So John asked, Sam, I think this one's for you. He was asking for an example of where you've been able to remove decisions and that burden of choice from an SDR's day.
I don't call it a burden of choice, but we want to make sure that we're focusing our brain juice into the right areas. Right?
Cool. I like it.
So I actually think that like sequences go a long way for that, where you just like you figure out the structure and you know a structure that works for your particular prospect, and then you can focus all of your energy into like writing the first email that sequence is going to amplify. You don't need to think about, should I be calling right now? Should I be doing this? So you can focus your energy into getting the right people in sequence and then doing the right kind of sales activity when that activity comes. And you don't have to scatter all of your focus around all kinds of different places.
Okay, cool.
Also, another one on the cold calling side is just getting really good at the top 5 objections. Like 90% of what you're going to be faced with as an SDR, at least, is going to be like one of 5 things. So like getting really good at those, as opposed to trying to know all 100 that you could possibly be faced with, just make things a lot more simple for you and help you focus in the right place in cold calls.
Right.
I agree.
Two different examples.
I think that those are some solid examples, right? It's who to call, how to call, right? What is active responding look like, right? What themes can you identify? And that's going to help the rule of thumb. Where I disagree a little bit, right, with the sequences, I agree that if you have structure, this is the rule of thumb. It's also great to break out a little bit, right, and to really empower and allow the reps to use a little bit of judgment. And I'm sure you mean this, Sam, as well, right? When because some things are going to navigate out a little bit, and so how can we effectively get to the outcome that we're looking for? Is allowing a little bit of that flexibility, because that's where the fun comes in as well, right? That's where you're really going to inspire them to want to win and want to win in a way that works really well for them. But completely agree with Sam in that if you really provide a strong framework in that way, that's going to work 90% of the time, 95% of the time, that's going to allow them to focus on their words as opposed to the type of activity, etc.
Well, one thing too, I love this talk. I'm a really big frameworks kind of guy too. And Sam, this is our first time chatting too. So it's nice I followed your content for a long time and it's like very tactical, which I love. We're talking frameworks, having a framework. A lot of sales teams, it's here's the script. Here's what you need to say. Here's how you respond. And there isn't really any, I'm really big on why, what, how. Like they need to understand like the business case behind this, the business value, the business problems, the what, the scripts, all this stuff, the how. Like a lot of people are providing the how to, and sales reps love how to, right? But not understanding the framework, it doesn't allow you to actually make it a bit of your own and to be in the moment. So I don't want to gloss over that. I don't think it's obvious that like many sales teams, at least maybe they just gravitate towards me because they don't have it, but a lot of them don't even have a framework or a way of thinking in place, let alone scripts and stuff like that. And it's extremely how oriented at the cost of giving no context.
I love that. The why is so vastly important because that's what's going to allow for the deep level of understanding that you're talking about, Jason, right? And that's what's going to allow them to get off script a little bit or do it uniquely or do it in a way that really makes sense. But you're so right. And thank you for sharing that framework. Couldn't agree with you more on that.
Love it. Okay, so it's not, I could go down that rabbit hole for a long time. I want to get to another question though, which was I thought a really interesting one. This was from Jenna. Thanks for this question, Jenna. Back when we were talking about metrics, Jenna asked if any of you have seen a shift in metrics due to everybody kind of all of a sudden having to manage remote teams. Like, are you as leaders thinking about rep productivity different? How have you dealt with any of those changes? If you haven't changed, have you seen other sales leaders change in terms of rep productivity and this, remote life or hybrid life that I guess we're now all living?
I'm happy to
Take
jump in here. Yeah. So I joined AirCall in Q4 at the beginning of Q4, and so it was a really interesting experience to join remotely to lead various sales teams or go-to-market channels from a remote setting, not just a remote team, but truly remote, not being able to, right? We're all in that same boat in that regard, so I don't have to explain it. But with that, the team was, certain teams were struggling. And, some leadership had said, okay, well, it's COVID. Like, I'm confused on how much to press. And I think that this was, a very, common theme that many experienced. And, when I really thought about it, and you want to be there for your employees. You want to make sure that mental wellness is observed and cared for, and really curate. How do we curate and care for this community? At the same time, when I really thought about it, allowing metrics to slip too much, right, means that they're not going to find success. And that's going to harm them emotionally even more. And so, what's really difficult as a leader is you have to find that balance of making sure that we're providing the platform and environment for people to want to continue to contribute, to want to achieve certain metrics. And I think this is where another why comes into play, of really explaining why, right? Allowing the reps to realize that, they still have rent to pay, we still have bills to pay, right? We need to keep the lights on, and we've got a lot of customers to care for and continue building a community. And so it's about the responsibility we each have to each other. And so I know that's more philosophical than what you were looking for in terms of an answer, but I do think that it's going to be somewhat situational. It's checking in with your reps to see if you can really push for those extra 5 calls, or really to hit the metrics at 110% or 100%, or if you need to soften and say this person has a lot of external factors going on in their life right now. What is the right number for them? And that takes more time. It's harder to scale that way, but we really need to, because that's what's going to allow for the long-term success. But it's having the conversations to guide them and say, okay, I understand. This is why. How do we get you back to a place where you can perform at what we've deemed as the right level in terms of how to quantify the most success for you?
I love it. I wish you were my first sales leader, because mine wasn't like you. Sorry, Jason or Sam, were you about to say something?
I'm dealing in the outbound world, and I'm curious, Sam, your take on this too, and what you are seeing with your teams. But pickup rates is kind of the thing that everyone complained about at first with COVID. And I think this is a case by case scenario. But what I found with a lot of the clients that I would come in and work with is that the pickup rates were lower because they believed that the phone wouldn't work as well because people are not at the office anymore. And I think there was maybe an adjustment period for some companies where they had to forward numbers to people's mobiles and all this other stuff. But I've seen pickup rates actually get back to where they were pre-COVID. And it's more mental around people thinking that people are not at the office, so I'm not going to call the office, which is like a virtual phone system for every company these days. You know what I mean? I think that was a really big one. But again, more mentality around the pickup rate than anything else. And then the other thing that I noticed too is actually drop not in activity level, but drop in quality activity. So like decrease in email response rates, positive response rates, meetings booked, like that sort of thing, just because people were not working in an environment that was as structured. So I think that like a thing that you could do there that I've seen pretty successful, I'm doing this with a client right now, is just when you do your cold calling blocks, get your whole SDR team, or even your AEs, if you're really big on outbound right now, have a couple 1-hour blocks a week where everyone does it at the same time and they do not schedule meetings over it. And you can create a bit of a virtual sales floor. They actually do this at Rev Genius in that community. I think they have some sort of virtual sales floor, but that's been pretty successful too. It's like getting people on the same page and trying to create that in-person experience where people are doing something together as much as possible too.
I like that. I'm glad you brought up that about phone numbers and connect rates, because I think there was it was everything was a little weird when the pandemic first started.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like when we're setting meetings, most of the time there's cell phones anyway. So it was like we lost the office numbers, but the office numbers weren't even good in the first place. So now that we've kind of routed to cell phones, now data providers have more cell phones. Actually, I agree with you. I think it's gone up a little bit. So I think that's cool. As far as metrics, I think for a long time we've gone with like dials. Now we have like activities and dials. I'm obviously biased because I'm at Outreach, but looking at things more holistically, like, okay, how many people do you have in this particular process, and measuring that gives managers a much better feel for what's going on. Like dials can be faked. We don't know dials can be faked. Right? So just like looking at like the dial number and email number or activity number is really hard. Looking at like the type of sequence, the people that are in those types of sequences just gives you a much better feel. And again, sorry to get, I feel kind of weird talking about Outreach because I don't want to feel like I'm selling it, but it's like, That is an important, different way to look at metrics.
I think it's about the results, right? At the end of the day, it's the results that you're really looking for. And so, yeah, like you could game the entire system, every type of activity there. And so, agreed with you in that. It's really what you're inspecting, right, to lead to the right results.
Jana, when we spoke last time we talked, you outlined how Aircall recently built like a framework, a criteria for success, a framework for measuring skill improvement, and a guide for coaching and improvement. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you thought about seeing it put into practice? If it's still too
absolutely.
early,
I wish I could say that Aircall built it. We did not. This is something I brought from my network. I worked with coaches for years from Forte Consulting, Johanna Baird and Kim Morrow, and they taught us a framework called Win, Learn, Change. And we used it at Blue Wolf. We used it at Mondo, the previous two companies I was with. And it allows retrospective thinking, and it allows really to think about, right, the why, right, and it'll strengthen the why that Jason was talking about before, and Sam talking about the results of like what we're really trying to drive. And so it's a very simple framework. After prep work for a call, or really post work, what did we specifically do or say that impacted positively to get to our outcome, or inch closer to the outcome? Learn, right, is what could we have done differently, or what did we hear that might impact to get us to the outcome that we're looking for? And as a result of those learns, what are we going to change to strengthen our ability to get to the outcome, right? And so this is something that we've put in place. I do it with the directors that are on my team. We do it on a once a month basis of just how the month went. And we're about to launch it more across the board, across all of our teams. So I'll follow up and let you know how that goes. But over the last couple of weeks, we started doing it after all the customer calls that I've been a part of. And it's just a dynamite way for a rep to say, hey, you know what? I wasn't perfect, and this is what I could have done differently. And what's most important is that I share as well, and I really critique my own performance as well. So it's a powerful tool to allow for very fast retrospective thinking.
I love that.
Yeah.
And leadership being willing to model the honest self-critique and self-improvement.
Yeah, because the whole thing, right? We all know this about, outbound especially, is you have to be able to realize what's working and what's not, very specifically for you as well. We could offer all of the frameworks, all of the scripts, but it may not work as effectively person to person. And so it's really going to allow you to create your technique that works best for you.
Yeah, I love that. The reflection is something that I noticed individual reps don't do a lot of unless prompted to. So I had a client, and he has 7 BDRs, and the thing that he was doing in his one-on-ones is they would kind of waste a lot of time getting to the something actually helpful and useful for them. Because he would be downloading a lot of the information in the meeting. Yeah, he knew the stats and the activity and all that other stuff. One thing that we implemented was basically what you're suggesting, Gianna, this Win, Learn, Change. It's a document with 5 questions on it that forces them to self-reflect on their week and actually really look forward to it. They put it on a Word doc or a Google Doc or put it in Slack. It takes them 10 minutes to do, and they send it to them at the end of the day on Friday. So when he goes into the one-on-one with his reps, they've already reflected on their week, and they're coming into the one-on-one diagnosing what they think they should change. Versus, I think a really big challenge in leadership is when people come to you and they want you to give them the answer. And that's the worst place to be in as a leader, because you're just in firefighting mode all the time. So I think implementing that thing on a rep level, a lot of the reps, they really like it because it gives them something to do and to think about outside of the job. They think bigger picture, much like a business owner working, on the business versus in the business. Allow them to reflect on their pipeline versus being in the pipeline all the time.
Yes, I love that. And what you're saying about thinking bigger, I just did an all hands call with my team the other day, and the whole theme was we're all CEOs, right? We're CEOs of our business. And so a CEO is constantly thinking about ways to improve the impact that they have, right? And what else they could be doing to drive more impact. And so, Jason, thank you for expanding, because you're exactly right. It allows for that broader mindset thinking.
if you don't mind, one of the things that we talked about has come up a few times is technology. And I think this is where the conversation around productivity often leads is like, oh, well, there's this, this platform that can help you automate all of these sales tasks, or there's this data quality tool you can use so you have fewer time, less time wasted on wrong numbers or bad email addresses. How do we reconcile this push towards like automation with the other approach that we often hear about in sales and especially prospecting work, which is personalization? Like, how do you reconcile those two things and think about it from a productivity standpoint? Sam, can I ask? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So you just have to make sure you're automating the right things. Like if it's done in the right way, you're automating things that are not sales activity or not the best use of an SDR's time or a sales rep's time, and it opens more time for ways they can make a bigger difference. So people don't always get that exactly perfectly right, but I think ultimately the great part about automation is that it allows a lot more time for sales activity.
I love that. I like to think a lot about because there's kind of there's this way that people are attacking the problem. It's either mass blast and murder by numbers type of thing, or it's like quality, right? And I think you have to find a balance, right? I think everyone would agree with that. And so if you're taking this quality first approach, basically what you're doing is, instead of finding patterns across personas, which is what a lot of people do, what's the pattern across every VP of sales that I reach out to? What is the pattern in the situations that their companies are in or that their sales orgs are in? I know you guys do a ton of this, Sam, because I see you talk about it a lot. And it's like, what are the half a dozen different situations that I'll find a company in? Are they hiring BDRs and SDRs? That's a specific type of message I can have a sequence for that removes the thinking from that type of approach. And like looking at the different situations and getting a little bit more granular with the pattern other than just job title, kind of patterns or company type or industry.
Yeah. Although job titles are pretty important. You can get a lot of information like up front really quick on that. But yeah, one thing that I look at a little bit differently is, instead of making like a different sequence for like a different situation, like a lot of times like the sequence that works, like the sequence structure that works is pretty generic. And so you can reuse that structure and keep it simple for the reps. And then you can kind of change the beginning of that sequence that informs the rest of the sequence there. So, but yeah, definitely like one very easy thing to do is figure out kind of those 4 or 5 specific situations that are a big deal, and making specific templates for that too. And you can kind of do that in a very short amount of time. And get great results.
I'd agree with both of those. Sorry to interrupt again. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think to extract, both points, it really is about that balance, right? Because you do want to get volume, but you want to keep it personalized. You want to keep it meaningful. And most importantly, why we say that is it's about making it relevant to the end recipient. And so exploring those situations, as Sam had mentioned, and earlier, Sam, you also mentioned like objection handling, right? Like what are those common objections that you get, and how do you handle them, tackle them with rebuttals? It's very similar now to what we're talking about, which are the situations. What are they experiencing? What are they going through? And that really, again, tying it back to Jason's why before, if they truly understand why they experience that and how your solution can help with that, that's really a winning strategy there. So it's providing kind of tying all of that together, which is going to help you best navigate these situations.
And like, what's the process for deciding what the right balance is? Is it just trial and error, or how do you be intentional about deciding ahead of time, these are the right things to automate, these are the right things to spend time on, that reps should slow down a little bit and do the call planning or whatever it is?
I think the best people to ask are your reps as well, right? Like there's going to be some trial and error, and there are ways to quantify your decision by, looking at how it augments and how it impacts, the numbers. And, you could always scale something back. I've found it really powerful to sit down with the team and say, let's build this together. What are you experiencing? What are your pain points? What takes you the longest that you don't feel has impact? What are people responding to? Where's your secret sauce coming into play where it positively impacts your outcome? and allow them to be part of this building process and helping you identify where these little nuances or these little pinpricks of the day happen and start there.
Got it. Love it. Let's do a few more questions from the audience. So, gang, and we can do some problem solving for you too. If you have questions for Jana, Sam, Jason, drop them in there. This one is from Bobby. So, Bobby Noonan is at an organization that has had some success with inbound sales, and they're launching an outbound motion. So, brand new to the org. What do you think his first two priorities should be, Jana?
I think one is hire the right type of rep. An inbound rep is very different than an outbound rep. And so really think about the qualities that it takes to be successful within the outbound role and make sure that you're interviewing for that specific. That would be my absolute number one. And then second is really, I'm going to steal this from Sam because it's something that Sam mentioned before, which is have all of the right components already in place. Right? What accounts are they going to call into? Make sure they understand the right titles to, call into, so that the non-negotiables are already there and decided, so that they could focus
that makes
on
a whole lot of
the
sense.
craft.
Makes so much sense. The two must-have ingredients like the right reps and the right data that they'd have to use to do an outbound motion. One of the cool things you've kind of touched on this a few times, Jana, is that if you hire, let's say. Just for the sake of argument, Bobby, I don't know your experience, but let's say you've never personally done outbound, right? You go hire some outbound reps that do know how to do it. You don't have to have all the answers as the leader of that team. You've got people who can give you feedback and help you build the motion and the messaging as you go. So I love that tip to focus on hiring first, John.
One more thing to add on to that, if you're starting outbound for the first time, is I would just highlight it's really important that you clarify who you reach out to in which way, because that's all this big new thing. Like if you select the wrong people, or you select the wrong people 10% of the time, and you put them in time intensive sequences, it can totally ruin a rep. So that's something that maybe didn't make as big of a difference when people were coming inbound, makes a huge difference in outbound, is making sure that they're very good at picking their target. Otherwise, a lot of time can get wasted very quickly.
I got a couple of things to add too.
Please.
Because a lot of companies come to me when they want to go outbound the first time, and I'm really picky about the clients that we bring on board because it's a disaster in a lot of cases. The messaging is so important because you're catching people on outbound, you're catching them earlier on in the buyer's journey. They may not even be on a buyer's journey. So what people tend to do is they prospect to them like an inbound lead. So they'll prospect to them like they already know that they have a problem, like they're problem aware, that they already know what the solution is going to be, all this other stuff. So I think the big thing is that people scale too early. So before you hire a bunch of people, maybe bring up 1 or 2 people on board, figure it out, make it work for those people, and then scale. The second thing I'd recommend too is customer interviews. They're a lot of work to do, but the thing that you want to find out from your customers is what was going on before you decided to come inbound. What was the problem you were having? What did you see as the way to fix that? What did you try yourself? And really looking at the inbound success and reverse engineering who was involved with that. From a messaging standpoint, from a persona standpoint, you got to really understand what are the people that are going to be involved in this, instead of just going after, with outbound, a lot of people just go after a decision maker. They don't think about multi-threading or other departments that might be involved. I could talk about this for an hour, but those are the kind of the high level, kind of mistakes that I see people making typically.
Jason, one thing you said that I think is really fascinating, sorry, because I think it is such a great fast forward for Bobby, right, who is very successful in inbound but starting outbound, is use your success in inbound as your clues to understanding what outbound might be looking for. And that reverse engineering is a really interesting way of building the talk tracks, of understanding what these scenarios are that we were talking about before. And so how powerful that is. So Jason, thank you for sharing that, because I think that that's such an easy concept to break down a complex issue. Is how do you build outbound when we've been traditionally inbound? Okay, understand why people have come to us inbound. What are those scenarios, those problems, those solutions that they're looking for? And then when you're having that outbound conversation, how do you uncover which scenario they might be in that we've already discovered and know how to work through from the inbound perspective? Really cool.
I love that. and it it aligns well with, I was just going to say what Casey said. In the chat. If you're not looking, he or she, I don't know who you are, Casey, said,
Or they.
or they, yeah, thank you. Hi Casey, created a different set of qualification criteria when they sat down and started to create an outbound motion. Because in theory, you're not just going after the low hanging fruit, or the people who are in a project coming inbound. You actually have to go out and create demand. And so, like, understanding that pre-pain mindset with those user interviews and thinking about it in a different way. It's a whole dynamic.
Yeah. I would say another thing, just like switching from inbound to outbound is really hard. Like if you're a manager, like ideally, like Jana was saying, maybe you bring someone in and that's the first thing they do. Like a lot of people can do outbound, but switching from inbound to outbound can be a little bit tough. One other thing I was going to say about outbound is it's a little bit messier. Like it's a little uglier. Like you're literally calling and interrupting people that don't want to talk to you, that want to hang up the phone, but they don't. It's like it's just understands can be a little bit messier or a little bit uglier than inbound, and that's okay. It's just part of the how it works.
Good points. Love it. So earlier on, this is where maybe we could spend the remainder of our time together until we run out of awesome tips for this audience. Shireen, I think it was, I can't read my handwriting, asked about if the three of you are seeing patterns in behaviors, habits, like actual actions taken from people on your teams who are the most productive, or clients you've worked with, Jason, in your case, who are the most productive. So make it real for us. When we bring it back to productivity, what are the things, the habits that make productivity real?
I got a big one. So I worked with a guy, I'm still working with him, Ethan, and he sells into VPs of marketing at really large insurance companies. And we got his cold call connect to booked meeting ratio from about 1 to 14 to 1 to 3. So he doesn't have to talk to 14 people to get a meeting anymore. It's about 1 out of every 3. One thing that he is just religious about, and every top rep at every company I work with, is they treat the whole outbound motion, especially the messaging, as a rough draft piece of content. So every time they pick up something around someone's like, oh yeah, my priority is this, I'm working on this, or hey, I care about this, they transcribe that, listen back to the recordings, whatever it is, they write this stuff down word for word. What worked really, really well for him and the rest of my clients that do really well, especially on the phones, is they're so in tune with their prospects' priorities. And not just, oh yeah, my priority is around growing revenue. No, like really getting super specific. My priority right now is that, our brokers are sharing content in their proposals and I don't have a way to control what they're sharing. And that creates a risk for us. That's a priority that a lot of VPs of marketing share with him, and finding those patterns. It's that working living, breathing document that you're always adding new things into as you come by.
Love it. So just to me, that's a fundamental, right? Really good listening skills. The productivity doesn't come from the fancy, last mile of the little, Chrome extension or the app that you can add to your phone for extra bit of productivity. It's about sales fundamentals, listening skills, mirroring, right?
Yeah, and I think the documentation of it is really
documentation.
Important. The recordings, I don't know if I can mention the brand name, so I won't. Like the companies that have call conversation analytics, they do a great job of recording stuff, but how do you actually use that in your next cold call? How do you reflect? That's been a theme today. How do you reflect at the end of the week and say, in 10 conversations today, I heard a pattern? And how does that get implemented into my messaging and how I handle objections and how I cold call? The implementation, I think, is the key that I see people dropping. He has structured time in his calendar every Friday to reflect on that stuff.
Sam, what about you? At the top of the productivity leaderboard, what do you see those people doing?
I mean, it's going to come back to clarity around the goal. Like if you're unclear about the goal, you can kind of focus your time in the wrong places. If you're not constantly asking yourself, is this getting me closer or further to kind of the metric that I'm ultimately compensated on, that's my goal, you can burn a lot of time. So I would say number one, the easiest thing is making sure your number one goal is very clear if you're managing a team. And if you're a rep, figuring out what that is and doing a really honest audit of what you're doing and saying, hey, is this driving me closer to my goal or further away?
Love it. Cool. Good summary. And Gianna, let's end with you.
Sure.
At Aircall, which, by the way, is the sponsor of this webinar today. Thank you so much for sponsoring, making this possible. Really cool conversation.
Absolutely.
What do productivity masters, salespeople at Aircall, what do they do?
Well, I think this is a theme that I've seen everywhere. The people at the top of the charts, right? They bring their secret sauce, and that's something that I've mentioned before, right? They understand what that number one goal is. So Sam, again, completely agree with you. What is that defined outcome that you're looking for? But top of the charts, they're putting a little bit something extra. They've figured out their way to master their full potential and drive the results that to overperform. Right? When I think about process, when I think about creating more frameworks and providing more of methodology to everyone's day to day, that's really for your kind of middle tier rep, right? But top of the charts, give them some flexibility. Let the A players, let those like natural people who are just great at what they do, let them soar. To give them a little bit of flexibility as long as the non-negotiables are still there.
Okay. All right. I'm going to wrap it up. But before I do, Jonna, let me just ask you, is there anything else you feel like we didn't cover you want to add to the conversation on productivity?
Oh my goodness, it's such a broad question.
I know, it's big.
I love it. That's big. I think that having been able to speak with you, I think that you figured out my MO pretty quickly, which is let's inspire, right? Let's allow people to have fun. Let's allow our employees to really think critically and at the same time figure out what's really important to provide for them, right, to have a very productive day, which is, what we were talking about before. Give them the account list to clearly understand, what are great accounts to call on. Give them the scripts that they're going to use as the rule of thumb so that they understand the scenarios and how to navigate them, and make sure that the goal is 100% identified, right, and the metrics that you're looking for by and large, and then give them some flexibility. Let them have fun. Let them think critically, because that's how they're going to learn and grow. And that's how they're going to help iterate your current process. That's how you're going to help them innovate and evolve as the company evolves and scales as well. So bring them in, fold them into that.
Like I said, I wish I had you as my boss. Is that alone?
I'll tell you, this is the first time that I've really been able to lead the way that I've always wanted to lead it. It took years to really figure out who my leadership persona is. How do we create an environment where numbers are important, but really it's about development of people to help you get to those numbers. And I really credit Aircall and my boss for giving me, and allowing me that space, and it's working. We're growing like crazy. So a huge credit to the team, who each of them have adopted this responsibility mindset and this leadership mindset to want to improve every single day and really learn how to be self-critiquing along the way as we build this community together. So it's pretty special. I got to say, I'm really happy.
Gianna, I know y'all are growing like crazy, both in terms of teams, you're hiring, and your customer base is exploding. If people in the audience want to get in touch with you, where can they find you? Oh
my word, please, please, please. We need great people, and we're at the point where we are scaling so fast. We need to bring in really strong and wonderful people. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to find me. I've got a great Italian name that's hard to spell, so screenshot that right now. Although Colin looks like he's typing it away. And then we also have all of our jobs posted on our website, of course, but please feel free to reach out either way. I'd love to continue to build this community. And any way that I can be a resource to anyone on this call, I'm more than willing to do that as well. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the time today. You've been a joy. I'm inspired by your leadership. You're going to pull me a little bit out of the weeds. Maybe I'll be a little bit easier on my team. Let them be a little bit more human this week. So I appreciate that. I love that. Thanks for being here, Gianna. Sam and Jason, thank each of you as well. It's good to see you. I'll see you both around. And lastly, biggest thank you to the Sales Hacker community. Y'all always just bring the best, most insightful, data-driven, innovative conversations. You're helping one another in the chat.
I'd love to see it. If you want more of that, go to saleshacker.com and join the community there. If you're not a part of that forum, there are all kinds of awesome. We've got private roundtable groups. We've got Ask Me Anything sessions with amazing sales leaders like Gianna. All kinds of stuff going on all the time. So if you like this, you want more of it, it's at saleshacker.com. Thanks for being here, gang. Really good to spend some time with y'all. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll give you 8 minutes back. Maybe go take a break or just hit the phones. We'll see you.